It's right now. Hi, Ari.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you very much, and welcome to The Beat, everyone. I'm Ari Melba reporting on this showdown today at the Supreme Court, where the Trump administration is trying to reverse a string of losses in a long shot bid to basically rewrite the Constitution. You can see the outside of the court today. Some people gathered. The lawyers arguing for the Trump administration were confronted with their lower court losses. Judges have blocked Trump's now futile order that claimed he could somehow cancel the citizen protections that are in the U.S. Constitution. So, this lawyer was pressed on why, on behalf of the Trump DOJ, they would even try to go and bring this case. In other words, the Supreme Court judges were asking, why should we even take what has been this losing case as an appeal? Here is exactly how Justice Kagan crisply put it in her questioning.
You're losing a bunch of cases. Why would you ever take this case to us?
You're losing. Why take it to us? That's a Supreme Court justice today referring to how the Trump immigration appeal has been a losing case for Trump, and it is not even close. Some stories are complicated. This one is simple. This is because the Constitution already very clearly states that people born here are citizens. All persons born or naturalized in the U.S. are citizens, period. This has actually been a point of pride that the United States has defined citizenship this way, uniformly. In other words, not by religion, or not saying you're born here and you're a citizen unless you believe in this or that. No, you're born here, you're a citizen. The language is clear, so it's not even close when it comes to what lawyers call interpretation, because sometimes there are valid disagreements within the branches of government about what something means. Sometimes it's Congress versus the White House, or how an agency, which is part of the White House oversight system of the executive branch, how do they interpret a bill versus the lawmakers who wrote the bill? But this isn't that. Everyone knows the Constitution beats a president's executive order. And that's not a new or partisan point. If that were not the case, every president could theoretically cancel the parts of the Constitution that they don't like with a pen. So it's not even close that the Constitution's definition of citizenship beats a president trying to disagree with it. And by the way, that's not ideological. If you imagined a very liberal president who wanted to rewrite the Constitution to allow perhaps easier or more citizenship, they couldn't do it by executive order. And so it is with the reverse. Donald Trump trying, whether it's a matter of messaging or law, trying to cancel out and narrow citizenship in the Constitution with executive order isn't allowed. Not even close. That's the baseline for Justice Kagan's questioning today, which was so grounded in objective, kind of non-debatable legal history that one of her colleagues, Trump appointee Neil Gorsuch, said admiringly, basically as a positive from the bench, that Kagan asked better questions than he could have. So here is more of her exchange today with the Trump DOJ lawyer.
You're losing a bunch of cases. This guy over here, this woman over here, they'll have to be treated as citizens, but nobody else will. Why would you ever take this case to us? In a case in which the government is losing constantly, there's nobody else who's going to appeal. They're winning. It's up to you to decide whether to take this case to us. If I were in your shoes, there is no way I'd approach the Supreme Court with this case. This is not a hypothetical. This is happening out there, right? Every court has ruled against you.
Every court's ruled against you. You're clearly losing. Why even take it to the Supreme Court for what she is implying? We don't have a ruling yet, but will be a very clear, more prominent total loss. It's clearly a long shot bid from the Trump administration. That's why the order's already been blocked everywhere. It is not running anything. It's powerless right now because 4 judges ruled against Trump, doing what I explained is not even close, trying to rewrite the Constitution by executive order to cancel out people's rights. This is a point that the immigrants lawyer emphasized because it goes in their favor how judges have already found this Trump order blatantly unlawful. So it was all pretty much dead on arrival legally, not close as a matter of how executive orders work or how citizenship law is handled. So any honest court process would land here, not break from it. And I can report that tonight, now that we've heard the arguments, the Trump appointees seem to join the whole court's skepticism today. That's clear in the questions. It's clear from a lot of the headlines and summaries from various experts. That includes Gorsuch, as we mentioned, and other justices who noted that this Trump long shot bid was already found to be unlawful, unconstitutional in the lower courts. So all of that is bad news for the Trump effort. Whether they have some other strategy that's been discussed to clog or overload the courts, overload the system, try to kind of make everyone feel frazzled. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at a clear loser and say there must be some other reason. Sometimes there are, other times there aren't. Other times people just make bad or incompetent legal decisions. But another thing happened here that also cut against some of the Trump efforts. Justice Barrett, a Trump appointee, took the example of today's oral arguments, where the Trump folks are on shaky ground, to also ask about Trump's DOJ suggesting the radical, lawless idea that they could sometimes ignore court precedent.
Justice Kagan asked my questions better than I could have.
These district judges are not just doing universal injunctions, they're finding these actions illegal because they're exceeding existing authority.
Did I understand you correctly to tell Justice Kagan that the government wanted to reserve its right to maybe not follow a Second Circuit precedent, say, in New York, because you might disagree with the opinion?
Those are tough questions. They're always phrased in the sort of dry, respectful manner of the Supreme Court. And as a reminder, Trump lost big 7-2, losing the Trump appointees as well in that emergency order. But if you're not a total Supreme Court nerd, you might not keep track of how they do the hearings. That type of order, because it was on an emergency basis, didn't have one of these big oral arguments that are such a big deal and everyone goes to court and we cover it, right? And so that's relevant today because what we're seeing is some of the possibly pent up negative questions and arguments from the Supreme Court to the Trump team that didn't have a real avenue there. I mean, they did rule against them 7-2 and said they got to facilitate the return of that detainee. And I'll mention a bit more about that in a second. But big picture, this is the chance for these justices to ask these questions. And they clearly have on their mind not only what is this, quote, losing executive order case, as they've been discussing, but the wider thing that's going on here. So let me turn to that right now with you. Put it very simple. In a healthy, valid constitutional democracy, politicians do not try to break the law. They don't tend to publicly flout schemes to do that or ignore some court orders. And while America has a very up and down history on a lot of issues, most of the time in the modern era, that hasn't happened. You'd have to go back to Richard Nixon to find a president who blatantly talked about it. And remember, he ultimately left office under a cloud for it. In Trump's first term, there were many extreme activities. I bet you remember them. But if you want to be fair about history, during the first term, until we got to the post-election coup era, they generally said they would also follow orders. So we're actually living through something that is distinctly different right now and legally worse. In this second Trump term, the plots about maybe ignoring or flouting court orders are pushed out in the open. We've had multiple officials working for Donald Trump talking that talk, saying maybe they'll ignore some court orders or implying that's a power they might have. They don't have that power. It's a sort of a bad cop, lawless cop approach where they say that stuff while President Trump, who remains quite mindful of PR, will try to exploit that lawless mode. Maybe use it to see if he can shake down or intimidate various officials and courts. But then, in his words, he will claim he will still follow the law. He's repeated that even amidst these clashes where his aides say the opposite. So they've been doing that two-step. Today's case is about citizenship rights. The judge is blocking Trump's effort. But there is also the wider, ongoing immigration powers that Trump is trying to use to seize broader powers. He's leading an administration that has shown it will take any potential loophole to duck an order, as they did with that broadly worded Supreme Court ruling to facilitate the return of the mistakenly deported resident, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And that case is being litigated separately. So that's its own lane. It has to do with whether they can seize war powers. The Supreme Court said they can't, and whether they will ultimately facilitate his return, which they haven't yet. The wider theme, though, that I want you to keep in mind with the Supreme Court today is Trump officials testing those powers and using immigration as the arena that they want to see how far they can go. It's an incendiary approach, and it was a theme today with Trump appointee Barrett. This is kind of interesting, pressing Trump's top lawyer at the Supreme Court about this longstanding duty to follow court orders and precedents. Now, that particular lawyer actually got this job after making those sweeping claims that presidents could be possibly immune from ordering murders, assassination of American opponents. This was the SEAL Team 6 scenario. That's an expansive claim where Trump's team is not only trying to move the goalposts, as the cliche goes, they're trying to convert the whole stadium into their lawless Trump enterprise if they can get away with it. So today, that kind of approach, however lawless, was discussed in open court. Now, the lawyer's using pretty kind of arcane, but I think sneaky language to say that while they know the law is follow orders, there are, now the Trump lawyer says, quote, circumstances where it's not categorical, meaning in Trump's DOJ, maybe they don't follow the orders.
Our general practice is to respect those precedents, but there are circumstances when it is not a categorical practice. It is, and that is not
This
a new
administration's
policy.
practice or the longstanding practice of the federal government?
As I understand it, longstanding
Really?
policy of the Department of Justice. Yes, that we generally, as it was phrased to me, generally respect circuit precedent, but not necessarily in every case.
No, that is false. When you go work at a long-standing traditional DOJ, let's say one before the Trump era, you don't get some handbook that says, yeah, we follow the precedents a lot of the time, but not always. And as you can imagine, as anyone knows from any rule in any job or workplace in history, if somebody has the power to make exceptions, then they'll make exceptions, and they might do it in their self-interest. They might do it in ways that are hurtful or dangerous, but the exceptions swallow the rule. That's another cliche. Now, when the rule of law falters, it doesn't always combust. It can, like the outgoing president welcoming clear violence to overthrow his loss and then pardoning those convicted seditionists. That's the red line that Trump crossed on day one of this second term. It was a combustible event. Other times, the decline of the rule of law can come through this type of jargon. A smart lawyer, like Trump's Solicitor General, trying to slowly, incrementally normalize what you just heard, which is not okay. That you can violate some court orders. And notice he chose to give that answer right to the Supreme Court's face today. So take it together, and these arguments were important for the big moments, as well as the arcane ones. The big moment, and what you'll probably see in a lot of the coverage in the headlines, is a court which does seem today to have put any Trump partisanship aside and come together on basic law, which is a sign that part of the system may be working. I also got to tell you, it's a low bar. It's lower than maybe even the screen, because of course presidents don't have the power to cancel the Constitution with executive orders. As Justice Kagan said, why even ask the Supreme Court to deal you a loss on that point? But today we also heard one of the most controversial Trump lawyers of this whole Trump era call him respectfully Mr. SEAL Team 6, because that was the hypothetical he answered. And we heard him cross a new line by telling the justices to their face that the Trump administration does want to seize power to ignore some court orders. That will be, he admits, their policy. So even as the court pushes back, buckle up for them saying out loud in court what they want to do. We have two very special guests on this. They're back with me in 90 seconds. We're back with the New York Times Magazine legal staff writer Emily Bazelon and Stephen Levitsky, a political scientist at Harvard who actually was part of their effort to stand up to Trump, which is now a legal process, and the author of multiple books about American democracy and expert on exactly so many of the issues we're living through. Welcome to you both. Emily, your view of what we heard from the Supreme Court today, and specifically what sounded like some justices using today's arguments to also surface broader issues like, are we going to remain a democracy in the second term?
Yeah, it was an opportunity, as you're saying, for the justices to probe these questions about whether the government plans to obey court orders and to just behave in the regular manner in which the Justice Department and past administrations have behaved, which is to assume that judges want to hear that they're going to be listened to and that the government cares about what they say and what they order. That's how it goes in court. Judges run the show, the lawyers show up, and they try to seem extremely interested in the opinions of the justices. And normally they say, absolutely, we obey court orders. That's what we're here for. So any deviation from that rule is startling. And I think that the Supreme Court, especially in light of the decision last summer that granted presidents, including, of course, President Trump, broad immunity from any kind of criminal liability, this same court is trying to probe whether the government is essentially changed and whether the court can kind of trust the good faith actions and words and compliance of the government with court orders going forward.
Right. And there are many cases, but on the immigration area, the test they've had thus far is they cannot trust them to operate in good faith. There has been no factual or objective good faith effort to return the mistakenly deported detainee, which was a 7-2 Supreme Court order. Now, there may be times where the word facilitate is loaded with more ambiguity. For example, if you said, let's facilitate the rehiring of 10,000 people to USAID, and you rehire some but not all, lawyers and normal people could debate that, right? Here you got one person, he's stuck over there, and you got Trump officials admitting we're not trying to get him back. And so I think that goes to this context. And Professor, I want to bring you in, but also play another Trump appointee, Kavanaugh, also pressing down on compliance. This, again, to remind viewers, because we got more than one thing going on, this is back to the citizenship order that's been blocked. And Kavanaugh wanted to make sure you are following that this is blocked, right? Take a listen.
How is this going to work? What do hospitals do with a newborn?
The federal officials will have to figure that out.
How?
So you could imagine a number of ways that the federal officials could.
Such as?
We don't know because the agencies were never given the opportunity to formulate the guidance. They would have had 30
They're only going to
days.
have 30 days to do this. You think they can get it together in time?
This is discussing basically what would happen if they went and did this while they're not doing it now because it's been blocked. Professor, given, again, your background in studying democracy issues in general, plus we have all of these immigration powers that the administration is trying to seize, your thoughts tonight.
What we're seeing and what we've seen since the beginning of this administration is an administration that doesn't believe in the rule of law. Not one that is simply authoritarian, but one that is systematically violating the law until it gets stopped. And that's not how the rule of law works. I mean, Americans should reflect on why we're one of the richest, most peaceful, most stable democracies in modern world history. It's not because of the air that we breathe, not because of the water, not because of something in the American character. It's our institutions. It's the strength of our institutions, the strength of our rule of law. And that means that there are a set of laws, and everybody, every citizen, every business person, every politician, no matter how powerful, obeys the law. And when told to stop, stops. Now, we may disagree with laws. We may try to change them. There may be occasionally differences of interpretation. But the idea that you have a choice, that you could either obey the law, or if you don't want to, you don't obey the law, and you push it until you're stopped, that's lawlessness. And that's the kind of thing that breaks the rule of law. That breaks institutions.
I'll let you finish, but that's gangster, right? That's how gangsters operate on a day-to-day basis. They know there's laws, they follow some of them.
How most,
but if they, yeah, well, hold on, I'll jump in and then you go. It'll be like your class. I'll go right back to you. But I just want to be clear about this in plain English. Gangsters follow some laws some of the time. They're not breaking every law all day. But the reason why they have more power in life is people know that they will resort to violence, that they don't view the legal limit on that as pertaining to them. And so societies that end up with gangsters in charge become very dangerous, not just for people who are against the gangsters, but eventually, and I'm sure you can educate us on this, for a heck of a lot of other people within those borders. And so I'm curious to let you finish your point. what it means if we have that lawless mentality now by not only the people in charge at the top, but lawyers and DOJ trying to normalize it.
Yeah, I don't even remember my point, but I think you said it better than I did, Ari. The point is when governments decide that it's a choice, that they can decide whether they're going to obey the law or not, you can very quickly weaken institutions. And it is a lot harder. And I study Latin America for a living. It is a lot harder to break institutions, to weaken institutions, than to build strong ones. It takes decades, centuries to build a strong, effective rule of law. And the Trump administration is breaking that now at record speed. And it's putting at risk, and we know from years of research, it's putting at risk the very thing that brought us peace, prosperity, and stable democracy over the course of many decades.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me bring Emily in. There was a Leo DiCaprio moment here today. We can put up the footage. Justice Jackson citing a film that many may remember in some strokes, right? Catch Me If You Can. And it was a very apt analogy to what the professor just referred to, the administration's deliberate attempt or plot to test everything by saying, well, we're not actually going to comply in good faith, but if you catch us and it gets bad enough, maybe we'll pull back on some of this stuff. Let's take a look at that analogy she offered in court.
Your argument seems to turn our justice system, in my view at least, into a catch me if you can kind of regime from the standpoint of the executive, where everybody has to have a lawyer and file a lawsuit in order for the government to stop violating people's rights. I don't understand how that is remotely consistent with the rule of law.
Emily?
Right. Well, I think you see one of the liberal justices here trying to point out the vulnerability that we have, in part because of the conservative majority's immunity decision last summer, where it seems like the doors open to the government not necessarily following an order. And in this particular case, Justice Jackson is talking about, well, if we're not allowed to have a nationwide injunction, a national order from a district court judge stopping an executive order, then are you saying that people have to file a zillion lawsuits all over the country in order to stop this? And importantly, what happens in the meantime? And that goes back to Kavanaugh's point. Okay, so what is going to happen when babies are born and you refuse to recognize their citizenship rights? So I think the kind of upshot here is that the Supreme Court, and different members may feel differently, but they're trying to figure out, like, what is this administration? Is this what we bargained for when we provided this grant of immunity? Or is this really threatening to the rule of law and to our role? Because the Supreme Court, its job is judicial review, right? It says what the law is. That's how our country has worked. And if the administration is not going to honor and recognize that, then that diminishes and, even eliminates the Supreme Court's own role. They can't want that. That can't be what they thought they wanted last summer. And so I think trying to figure out where we actually are and how much they can trust the government is this kind of fundamental question. And it's clearly bedeviling the conservative as well as the liberal justices on the court.
Right. You're drawing us back to that key decision to make another film reference, Emily, to the court. I know what you did last summer. Everyone who follows this knows they created new law to immunize the president, and now he's president again, and boy, does he view it as a blank check. And SEAL Team 6 guy is in the courtroom saying, hey, we'll follow most of your orders. Deal with it. I mean, I'm simplifying, but that's what happened today. Even as more Trump justices say, you can't go this far. So people say, where is the crisis point? Well, we're in a part of it, even though it's dry. Like I said, not always a capital demonstration. Our thanks to Emily and Stephen on this big story tonight. Thanks to both of you. Coming up, a backlash to the Republican efforts to carve up the safety net. We also have a special guest on these grift issues, from the plane to the crypto. It is a lot of problems for Trump as he travels the world. But first, a giant retailer is warning the higher prices are coming in Trump's tariff America. Big story next. Let's take a look over at the largest employer in America that's also usually the largest retailer, Walmart. they are going to raise prices, and they're very clear it's because of the Trump tariffs. Their CEO says consumers will feel it soon.
Given the magnitude of the tariffs, even at the reduced levels announced this week, we aren't able to absorb all the pressure given the reality of narrow retail margins. But even at the reduced levels, the higher tariffs will result in higher prices.
This is Trump's government action driving up prices at the retailer you see here. Who will this affect? Well, we're the news. We try to give you the facts. If you're watching from inside the United States, it will affect 90% of you, because about 90% of Americans are Walmart customers in person or online. It's the largest company to say the tariff-related price increases on everyday goods are coming, as the Journal reports. Now, Trump has backed off some tariffs, including with China, without getting any concessions or any victories. What you are witnessing is someone who talked tough, made mistakes, backed off to try to help himself while other people pay the bill. A growing number of blue-collar workers who Trump saw as part of his base see that tariffs are hurting them. The Washington Post, again, reporting on the obvious politics. Consider how we got here.
Donald Trump imposes the steepest U.S. import levies in a century.
I don't think there's a single positive take on this. This is all just bad.
Business leaders around the world working to navigate trade uncertainty.
Our biggest message to our customers, your supply chain has become more expensive. I'm rapidly being liberated from my money.
Are you worried about empty shelves?
Not at present.
S&P's up 18% since its closing low on April 8th. It took 25 days.
Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know?
So, Rod, why don't we start with your word of the day?
Sure. It's volatility.
When you get up next to one of these things, you know, by the way, that we're not sending anything back when you bang on the side of them because they sound hollow.
That's right.
And empty.
There it is, an actual emptiness out there at the ports. There's new heat against this backdrop on Trump wanting a $400 million foreign gift while he's in the Mideast today. Austerity for you, fewer dollars for you, jet gifts for him. And the accusations about the grift are coming from inside the House. Republicans and even some conservative MAGA potosphere leaders saying, this one's got to stop or it's going to hurt them all. I have this breakdown's conclusion and some pretty big stuff coming up tonight right after this break, so stay with us. Walmart issuing big warnings. Donald Trump backing down in the trade war, especially with China. He had said, be good to him or there'll be consequences. Instead, he's backed down. If there's anyone blinking so far, it's the United States under Donald Trump. And amidst that background, we are now grinding through the remainder of a trade war. Wall Street has been more positive lately, thinking that the signs of some retreat mean eventually this whole thing goes away. You follow the news, so I bet you know with Donald Trump, might not be as predictable. And so to keep our eye on something that affects just about everyone in the United States, we've convened a special conversation among true experts tonight. Former ambassador to the EU under the prior Trump administration first term, Gordon Sondland, who, news viewers may recall, was a key witness in the eye of the storm in the very first impeachment process for then President Trump, and Jared Bernstein, who has served at the highest levels on the other side of the aisle, chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors to President Biden. He has a new piece in his Substack newsletter. This is not what they voted for. Welcome to both of you. Ambassador Sondland, I walked through what Walmart and others say are the problem with the Trump tariffs. So if you disagree, it's not necessarily with us. It's with the great leaders of Walmart and other companies. What do you say about the cost and failures of this now kind of unpredictably lengthy trade war?
Well, I think from 30,000 feet, Ari, and good evening, Trump is upending the entire world order to finally get rid of so many non-tariff barriers, which is where he's really focused and has been focused for probably 30 to 40 years of his life talking about this. We just are not treated fairly by other countries. And the tariffs have had the effect of not just convening people to talk, but to execute quickly. I believe those tariffs are ultimately all going to drop to the base of 10%, which, you know, brings in varied estimates between 200 and 300 billion a year of new revenue. That alone can make up some of the defense budget deficit. So I'm highly supportive of what he's doing. He's feeling his way around. This has never been done before. He's being responsive in a dynamic way as people give him real-time anecdotal evidence of where things need to be tweaked, where the dial needs to be turned. And what he's accomplished in 4 months is breathtaking.
Jared?
Well, you know, it's great to have someone on the other side of this debate for once, because it's been impossible to find any reasonable person to defend this, whether you're talking from the Wall Street Journal all the way to, more liberal outlets like this one. I don't think Trump is accomplishing any of the things we just heard from the ambassador. And if you just look right beneath the surface, none of it holds together. If you're talking about collecting 200 or 300 billion in revenue from tariffs, where does that come from? It comes from middle and low income people paying higher prices. Now, look, if the ambassador wants to defend that against the kind of comments that Walmart was talking about today, I'll be happy to listen. But this is not what those folks voted for. President Trump explicitly said, I'm going to lower costs. Today, we're hearing that his tariffs are clearly going to raise costs. And by the way, it's not just Walmart. Walmart is a benchmark retailer. They're the largest in the nation. Others will peg their price at. Target's already making similar sounds. And for what? And here's again where I think the ambassador has this wrong. Do we, what the food stuff, the food stuff that Walmart sells most commonly in the grocery department is bananas. So let me ask the ambassador, is the problem that we don't grow bananas here? Is that what we're trying to do here? Because that ain't going to happen.
Was that directed at me?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, yes. To you. Respectfully.
Okay. No, of course we don't grow bananas here. But look, what Trump is trying to do, Jared, is your president, the administration in which you served in, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, you name it. They have been trying for decades to get some of our friends to allow a similar access to their markets that we allow to others. And we've been shined on, or to use President Trump's term, we've been tapped along. We schedule another meeting. That's a success of a trade negotiation, is we finish a meeting and schedule another one. How do you get everyone to sit up, focus, and join the party? You slap huge tariffs on them to the point of where you're ready to break their economies. And all of a sudden now, the entire world is scrambling to put new deals together.
Let me jump in, and I appreciate the respectful debate. Let me jump into what you're saying, though, Ambassador, because first of all, we have the reference here from Jared to the banana issue. Everyone knows the money's in the banana stand. The Arrested Development fans out there will get the reference. But the money's not going to come to the U.S. for making the bananas, right? We're not going to grow them in our climate. You're saying a thesis, Ambassador, which is the tough tariffs will bring people to the table in a new way. And if you'd said that in January, we could all say, we'll see. But now haven't we seen? In other words, you're a business person in your prior life. You're a sophisticated person who worked in the Trump administration. You understand all this stuff. You've been inside. They must certainly see that that thesis hasn't happened, that it was the U.S. who blinked, that China is not rattled, and that Americans are currently paying higher prices, Ambassador.
Gentlemen, it's been 4 months. The amount of activity that's occurred in a short period of time, normally these things take years or even decades. I would say let's all take a chill pill and see where we are the same time next year. I have a feeling a lot of adjustments are going to be made for some of the problems that you're legitimately raising.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. And you're respectfully saying, give it more time, go to the future. So we'll go to the future. We'll have you back in the future to check in on this. We have you saying it here. Not at 4 months, but you're going to say, okay, 6, 8, 12, we're going to have to check on that, and we'll hold us all accountable to that. The other issue I wanted to get your response to, Ambassador, having worked and testified about the Trump administration, is this rather unprecedented, extreme effort to get money out of Qatar for a plane. Take a listen to some of the Republicans concerned.
That doesn't seem to be right, and I think it's not going to pass the smell test.
Well, they better sweep that plane from front to back.
I also think the plane poses
significant espionage and surveillance problems. So we'll see how this issue plays out. But I certainly have concerns.
Republicans concerned the proposed gift dwarfs anything any modern president has ever tried to pocket. The national security issues are there. Ambassador Sondland, people around Trump have often said that because of his wealth, he would be immune to this type of thing. Now he's, I guess, lining up to be the worst by a factor of 100. Certainly you can't defend this as a good idea.
Well, I don't understand it, Ari. First of all, if Qatar wants to give us a $400 million plane, they're giving it to the United States. Let's start with that. I'm not sure how that plane, even in the next 3.5 years before the Trump presidency ends, can be converted to be used as Air Force One. I'm a pilot. I have jet type ratings. I understand how these. Well, it's not going to happen, and everyone knows that. And you know, he's enough of an aviation buff. He knows that as well. It's then going to go to his library where he committed that he's not going to use it. It's going to be on display in some fashion. So I think it's a sideshow. I don't understand it. I do understand why he says, look, I don't want to turn. I don't want to turn.
I know you were a diplomat.
Yeah, can I please?
I know you were a diplomat. When you say I don't understand it, is that diplomat MAGA for it's a bad idea? Just so I understand the sentence.
No, let's break it down. I don't think he should turn down the gift on behalf of the U.S. government. I think it would be an offense to or offensive to Qatar. So I think he should accept the airplane.
Look, there's
the
this.
second.
Sorry.
The second piece is once you accept the airplane, then what do you do with it? It makes no sense to strip the airplane down and rebuild it in time for him to be able to use it in 3.5 years.
All right,
it's not going to happen.
Let me bring in Jared. Go ahead.
Okay, so look, Ambassador, you during your service, you signed a pledge which you upheld. I signed a pledge which I upheld, and all those members of Congress swore to a pledge which they're failing to uphold, and that pledge is to defend the Constitution. You can make all kinds of feather bedding for this, as you've been doing for the past couple of minutes, but you know as well as I do that the Constitution prohibits a gift like this, and in fact, I have the language here, from a king, prince, or foreign state. And all the nuances you're raising are,
Jared,
I think,
to
very
whom does it prohibit the
point. Now, hold on, let me finish. Sir,
to whom does it prohibit the gift?
Let Jared finish.
Congress has to approve. Unless Congress approves the gift, it is a constitutional violation. Congress has not approved the gift yet. The president, I've heard, the president is making sounds about accepting that. And I think anyone who's ever defended the Constitution has to call this out for what it is. I want to get back to the trade piece for 1 second.
Wait, no, but wait
Jared,
a minute.
I'm going to put Jared. Oh, I got it. I'm patrolling Jared as I did the ambassador, and Jared, you get a flag. You get a yellow flag on trying to go to a new topic. We're going to let the ambassador get his turn to respond to what I think what you phrased was an important point, Ambassador, which is it's not up to the president. He may have lawless ambitions. The Constitution says you don't take a king's gift without the congressional approval. And enough senators have said no to this that he couldn't get Senate approval right now.
First of all, as I understand the law, the president can take any gift on behalf of the U.S. government for the U.S. government without anyone's approval. Does anyone dispute that?
Well, no, I dispute it. I mean, even the Statue of Liberty went through a process precisely because the gift, whether it is for our public use or a mixed private benefit, should not curry too much favor. And so the Attorney General of the United States under Trump has said she thinks it's okay, but no, the Constitution says otherwise. At best, we could call it an issue to yet be litigated, Ambassador.
I believe the Constitution prohibits a gift to the president without congressional approval. I do not believe it prohibits a gift to the United States of America. Now, once that plane gets transferred to the library, to the presidential library, that might be a whole different cup of tea. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand what's involved in that. But as far as the initial transfer to the United States, I don't believe Congress has to approve that. I accepted all
France's
kinds
Statue of Liberty, which was, hold on, we're talking
all kinds
precedent.
of gifts. I accepted all kinds of gifts on behalf of the United States of America.
Sure.
And the gifts were given to me personally. They were handed to me, and I immediately turned them over to the USA.
Well,
I had nothing
I don't
to
want
do
to
with it.
lawyer you, Ambassador. I don't want to lawyer you, but they weren't given to you personally. They were given to you in your status as the U.S. ambassador.
Exactly,
and you
exactly.
Channeled
they
them
were
to the
handed
U.S.
to my.
And this is
they
not
were
that.
handed to my person. They were handed to my person.
Right, and just for the facts for the viewers, this is not that. Donald Trump has said very publicly he will be using this through an entity personally post-presidency, which is one of the many reasons it's had so much blowback. We covered multiple items. Jared, I know you wanted to get to tariffs. We'll come. He said he's going to have it as part of the library, which is that's
but he said he was not going to use the aircraft, just like the Reagan libraries. Same thing. He was going to put it on static
whether
display.
they fly it. Well, we've had conflicting accounts of why he wants to have it, but he said also that he wants a big plane that they can fly around because the other planes look larger, which is not library conduct. That's using it. So. Anyway, we've saved time for this.
President Obama said size. As President Obama said, size does matter.
Well, you know, we love having everybody on together. You guys had a civil debate. We'll have you back on together. Ambassador Sondland, Jared Bernstein, we'll be right back. For all the news and politics out there, tomorrow the beat goes to The Office. Ed Helms, the star of The Office, The Daily Show, of course, The Hangover, is making his beat debut. He's our special guest tomorrow. We can't wait to see him. So join us then. That does it for us.